Hey guys, it's Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. I've got a great Figured Out Baseball podcast for you today. We are being joined by Tyler Anderson in this podcast, who is a minor league pitching coach in the Los Angeles Angels organization. Pretty excited to have Tyler on the program. He's a former player of mine. I got to coach him for 1 year. I mean, he was a pitcher. I was a hitting coach, but still on the same team for a year. So it's great to reconnect with him. I'll give you Tyler's background before we jump into questions with him. He is a Perth, Western Australia native. Started his playing career in college at Glendale Community College in 2007. That's an NJCAA program in Arizona. Then in 2008, he played on the team that I was coaching at Southeastern Community College, a junior college in Burlington, Iowa. At Southeastern, we were ranked as high as number 15 in the country that year in 2008. Then Tyler went on to play at William Woods, which is an NAIA school in Fulton, Missouri. He was there in the springs of 2009 and 10. That team at William Woods, both years he was there, was ranked nationally, and it was the first time in program history that William Woods was ranked nationally in the top 25 of NAIA programs. They also went to the conference championship game in both years that Tyler was at William Woods. He then became the third player in William Woods history to sign a pro contract when he signed with the Perth Heat. They're a pro team in Perth, Western Australia, where Tyler's from. They are a part of the ABL, which is the Australian Baseball League. He played for the Perth Heat in Australia. They play through in North America what would be our winter, so they cross over calendar years. He played there in the 2010-11 season and played there again in the 2011-12 season. The Heat won the ABL championship both years Tyler played there. He was also a 2011 representative of Australia in the 2011 Asia Series, where they played against teams from Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Then Tyler started his coaching career at Dartmouth College, which is a Division I in the Ivy League in Hanover, New Hampshire. He was there in the springs of 2015 and 16 as an assistant coach. His second season at Dartmouth led the conference in ERA and walks per nine. His pitching staff set the school record in that second year, 2016, set the school record with 297 strikeouts. They also had a 9th-round draft pick and a 28th-round draft pick on the mound in 2016. Then in the spring of 2017, Tyler was an assistant coach at St. Louis University, a Division I school in the Atlantic 10 Conference. That year, 2017, St. Louis went 35-22. That was the third most wins in school history. St. Louis that year broke the school record by striking out 449 batters. They also set the school record with 19 saves that year and had a 32nd-round draft pick off of that pitching staff. In the fall of 2017, Tyler was an assistant coach for the U18 Australian national team. In October 2017, there was something pretty significant. Tyler published a paper called Implementing a Driveline Program at a D1 college, which we'll definitely get into that once we get into questioning here with the podcast. Then in the fall of 2017, Tyler was hired as the pitching coach recruiting coordinator at Lindenwood University, which is a Division II school in St. Charles, Missouri. However, he only spent the fall there. In January of 2018, he was hired to be a pitching coach in the Angels organization. He was there the spring of 2018, 2019. This will be his third year coaching in the Angels organization this year. In the offseason, the 2019-2020 offseason, Tyler was also the pitching coach for the Perth Heat back in Australia in the Australian Baseball League. The Australian Baseball League is now governed by Baseball Australia as well as Major League Baseball, so there is an affiliation with the MiLB there. And this year, Tyler will be the pitching coach for the Burlington Bees, which is the short season A team for the Angels in Burlington, Iowa. How about that for full circle? You played for me at Southeastern Community College in Burlington. Not that I was the head coach, but played on the same team I was coaching in Burlington, Iowa. This year, you'd be coaching back in Burlington, so that's kind of a cool thing we may also get into. But Tyler, really appreciate you spending some time with us today on the podcast, and I'm excited to get into this with you.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. Excited to talk some baseball.
As much as I want to talk about the paper that you published, the Driveline paper, I would like to start by kind of asking about going back to Burlington, where you started. It was your second year playing in college. I think, did we play the Bees that year? We might have went. I mean, no, we practiced there in the off season for sure.
Yeah, that was one of the seasons we didn't play, so I never got a chance to play at that stadium or play against the Bees.
Okay, that must have got canceled. So at that junior college, we would play the short season, or we'd play there from time to time. But when that team came back, they would kind of like play a couple scrimmages, and that was one of the things we did. But that year we didn't play them. Anyway, how does it feel this year to be going back to Burlington and reliving some memories from back in Iowa?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I don't think I've been back there since 2008, so it'll be cool to get back there. I was only there actually for one semester, so I didn't spend a ton of time in Burlington at all. So it'll be cool to live there for a while and explore the town a little bit.
I didn't realize that. So I also went to Southeastern just for the spring. I was there in the spring of 2008 and then the whole year of 2009. So I guess I didn't realize, I forgot anyway, that you had only also been there for the spring.
Yeah, I actually took online classes from Australia in the fall, and then just showed up at Christmas time and played. So.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about just baseball in Australia? For people who aren't familiar from the States here, a lot of Australian baseball players have to start out their college careers in junior college. Would you mind just talking about that a little bit, why that's the case, and kind of how that impacted your playing career?
Yeah, baseball in Australia it's actually pretty frustrating. They had a really good, successful league in the 90s, the 80s and 90s. A lot of professional players played in it, a lot of big names. The Australian guys were making enough money not to work jobs. And then the individual owners took over and just mismanaged the league and the teams, and it went bankrupt. And we didn't have a league for a lot of years. So in 2010, they restarted the league with help from Major League Baseball. Every team was owned by Major League Baseball, so there was no individual owners. All the teams got the same amount of money from MiLB, and that was the first chance to kind of give Aussie kids a place to play now. So when I was growing up, there was nowhere to play. You would go through your junior leagues, and then when you got older, you just played in the men's league, and that was it. There was no other options if you weren't signed to play pro ball. So the best option, and it kind of started around when I went to college, is for kids to go to college, and there's been hundreds of kids go now. It's pretty much the best option if you don't sign out of Australia as a 16, 17, 18-year-old. So yeah, it's the only option. The cool thing now is we can come back and play in the ABL, and players are starting to make some money. So there is somewhere for the Aussie kids to come back and play. A lot of them were going to junior college and then never coming back because there was nowhere to play. A lot of them stayed in the States and got married and stuff like that. So
because there is no high school baseball in Australia, correct?
It's no high school baseball. That's it. So you all play club baseball, and then there's some state teams and stuff like that for all the best players. And then when you're done, you just continue to play in a men's league, which made the men's leagues there pretty good. There's ex-big leaguers, ex-pro guys, ex-Olympians all playing in a men's league, which is kind of crazy.
And then what's the reason that most of the kids that from Australia that come and play in the States have to start at junior college?
There's multiple reasons. School is one of them. We don't take the SAT or ACT. You can take it here, but it's something you would only do if you're going to go to the States to study. So a lot of kids don't know what it is and don't take the test. I think you can only take it 3 or 4 times a year. So school is one. Money is another one. It's hard for Australian kids to pay $20,000, $30,000 to go to school. So if you can pay $3,000 to $5,000 or whatever it is to go to junior college, it's a much better option. And also, there's not a lot of scouting, so it's hard for players to get seen to go to a Division I school. There's not a lot of Division I schools that are going to come out to Australia and see a kid. So you kind of have to go to junior college, put up some numbers, and then transfer. So
I know for me as a junior college coach, it was exciting to get some Australian kids because you felt like you were like in an untapped market there, trying to bring it back.
It makes a lot of sense for a school in the Midwest that, there's not a ton of kids that if they're really good, they're probably going to go to Division I school somewhere else or stay in the state of Division I school. And so those junior colleges in cold weather to go get kids from Australia makes a ton of sense too.
Then, so one of the things I kind of found interesting was, usually when your players arrive as a college coach, your players get there in the fall and they've just completed their summer season, but obviously the seasons are the opposite for you guys in Australia. So it's a little bit of a different thing as well, just the adjustment of essentially the college season is happening in what would be like the fall, almost winter, for you guys as far as the seasons that you experienced. Was that anything that you had to deal with coming to Glendale the first time around, or?
Yeah, I remember getting to Glendale. It was middle of winter when I left Australia and showed up in Arizona. It was 110 degrees and ready to play. So obviously I knew I was going and was in shape and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a bit of an adjustment for sure. And then I didn't have to do it in Iowa. That would have been a big adjustment. So I got to show up in the fall, which is right in the middle of our summer season at home. Show up in the spring, which is right in the middle of our summer season. So that was huge for me going to Iowa.
Yeah. So this past year, the off season for the minor leagues, you got to go back home and coach in the ABL. You played there back in the day. How much has the competition level changed from when you played there to this past year when you coached?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. The league's got a lot better. There was good players when I was there. There's a lot of young pro guys that teams had just sent out. I think Didi Gregorius, Kevin Kiermaier, Reese Hoskins. Like, there were some really good players that first year, but there was a big drop-off from the best players to the worst players. I feel like when I went back this year, every team is competitive, and every team, they're individual owners now. MLB doesn't own the teams, so the individual owners are spending money, and there's some really good players. Most teams have an affiliation still. We had one with the Tampa Bay Rays, so we got 7 guys from the Rays, all pretty good prospects. And then you fill the team with young Australian guys, older Australian guys, and then guys that went to college and came back, and then indie ball guys that are trying to get another job somewhere. So it's pretty competitive. Those indie ball guys that have pitched in AAA and they're 33, 34 years old are pretty talented still. So it makes the league a lot better than what it was in 2010, 2011.
How do the fans down there, I mean, are they supporting the teams a lot? Do you see a lot of people at the games, or is it still something that's growing as far as fan base goes?
It's growing. The individual owners have helped because obviously they're trying to make money, whereas MLB was just kind of pumping money into it and hoping it would grow. But the individual owners want to see a return, so they're investing a lot of advertising. They're getting out. They're doing everything they can. So I would say the crowds were up this year. I think I saw somewhere they were up 25% from last year. They also added a team from New Zealand and a team from Korea. So that's driven the numbers up a lot because Korea's on the same time zone, so they watch all the games in Korea. Obviously, baseball's huge there. So the league's growing for sure, and I've heard rumors they may be trying to add 2 more teams. So
that's awesome. How would you say that the crowds are there compared to like minor league games would be in the States?
Very similar. Friday, Saturday nights is probably 2,500, 3,500, something like that. Thursday night games, probably a couple hundred, not that many. But on the big nights, they pack a stadium and 2,500 to 3,000. So it's growing slowly.
That's good. Hopefully it does. I mean, the more the game grows, all around the world, the better. But especially in Australia, New Zealand.
The league is perfect for a pro team to send prospects that either got injured during the minor league season, didn't play a lot, need extra at-bats, need more innings. It's ideal for that. If I ran a pro team, I'd send guys out every year that need extra at-bats, extra innings. It just makes a ton of sense. And us being with the Rays, they've seen a lot of success the last couple of years. They had Mike Brosu, who I think that's how you say his last name, played the year before I got there. And he was in the big leagues this year, playing at third base in the playoffs for the Rays. And then Jake Fraley made it to the big leagues and then was traded to Seattle. So they've had a couple guys that a year after leaving the ABL, they've been in the big leagues. So it's pretty crazy.
Now, one of the things that was always just a little weird to me about, I don't want to say weird, but it's maybe a little unfair. But the winter leagues that happen in like Latin American countries, there's the Dominican, the other winter leagues. Major league teams will pull players out of there, like when they've sort of hit their quota. You know what I mean? Like they go there to get to throw a certain number of innings or to get a certain number of at bats, and when they sort of they fulfill that, they're being pulled out, but the team is still playing and they may be going to the playoffs or whatever. Was it like that in the Australian League, or are guys there like for the duration? If they're there all year.
Well, they sent us 3 pitchers. 2 of those pitchers had an innings limit and left halfway through the season. One of them stayed for the full year, and then all the position players stayed for the full season. So some of the pitchers got to their innings limit and left, which makes sense. And then the position players just continued to play, which was cool.
Yeah, there's probably no way around that, I guess, with pitchers when they're, the people that are really paying them, like they're preparing to come back to the States and play. That's what they're really, I guess, there for.
Yeah.
But
the guys they sent us weren't guys that were hurt or anything during the season. They just sent them out to go to another country and English speaking and kind of they were 2 Latin guys, so kind of get around, get out of the country and learn more English and just throw 10 to 15 innings. So it made sense for those 2 guys to just play half the season.
Yeah. I'd like to talk next, Tyler, about probably one thing that has really changed the course of your career that you probably weren't expecting it to do that at the time, but the paper that you published in October of 2017 called Implementing a Driveline Program at a D1 College, which I know that I know you can at least find, if you're interested in reading that from Tyler, you can at least get it if you go to his LinkedIn profile. I'm not sure, is it anywhere else that anybody can access it if they want to?
I think it's on the Driveline blog somewhere. It's probably back a ways, but I think it's on the Driveline blog portion of their website.
Okay. Would you mind just talking about, first of all, why you did it, why you decided to publish that in the first place, and second of all, just kind of, talk about what happened. Talk about what you did at St. Louis, what you found, why you decided to publish something, and just sort of what what the experience was like at St. Louis implementing a Driveline program.
Yeah, I got to St. Louis. I actually didn't really know anyone there when I applied. I was just looking to move back to Missouri because we had just had a baby and my wife's from here. So I emailed Darren Hendrickson, the head coach there, and eventually got the job. So I came in and we were just talking about kind of my philosophy and what I wanted to do with the pitchers and stuff like that. And they had actually just done a weighted ball program the year before, and they probably had like 6 or 7 injuries or something like that. Like they had a lot of guys miss some time, and they weren't like too happy about weighted balls at all. They thought that was the cause, and they didn't want to do them, and that was a little bit frustrating for me at first because I figured this was my chance to where I could implement it. I'd been reading about it, I'd been learning about it. I did it myself to learn about it. So eventually we just kept talking, and I had to put a plan in place and showed Coach Hendrickson, and he was on board with it. We implemented it halfway through the fall so that I could see the guys and see where they were at as far as health-wise and in shape and stuff like that. We implemented it halfway through the fall a little bit, and then we went pretty hard in the winter months, and then early in January, February before our season started. And it was pretty successful. Guys were not necessarily velo jumps. There were some, but guys were just healthy, and they would throw a lot and just feel great after throwing. It took a little teaching and coaching and the guys to learn the drills and what felt good and what didn't, and let them individualize the program a little bit. But it worked really well. I don't think we had an injury that year. We pitched really well. We had Miller Hogan was pitcher of the year. Ended up getting drafted in the 32nd round, and then the year after I left, he came back to school, I think his senior year, and went in the 6th round. So guys were throwing harder. Guys were healthier. We were punching people out. So it was pretty successful. The reason I did it, I'd been a volunteer for 3 years. I felt like I was kind of spinning my wheels and trying to get a full-time Division I job, and everybody was kind of learning about weighted balls at that time, and I'd done a lot of research and a lot of learning and figured I could put some information out that may be useful to someone else that was about to implement it. I think the biggest thing with weighted balls is them being misused, and people blame the balls, but it's usually how they're implemented and programmed that's the issue. So I thought it would be smart to put out some information, so I knew Kyle a little bit, and Mike Rothwell at Driveline, and reach out to those guys and I could write it. And they were happy and on board, and it was probably the best thing I ever did. Within a couple months, I guess somebody at the Angels had read it and reached out to me. So it was huge for my career for sure.
Pretty amazing that a minor league or major league organization reads something like that and reaches out to you and says, "Hey, we'd like to have you." What was that conversation like? I mean, you had not applied for anything, right? They reached out to you.
No, I actually got a Twitter inbox message that said, "Hey, this is blah blah blah. Would you be interested in interviewing? Can you give me a call?" I showed it to my wife and was like, "This is spam or fake or something." It was just from like a random account on Twitter. So, so I was like, well, I might as well call the guy and see what happens. I called, and it was our farm director, and asked if I wanted to interview. So it was kind of crazy. I didn't hear from him from a while, and I texted him, was like, "Hey, am I going to interview?" And he texted me back, "Hey, just give me a call at 2 o'clock tomorrow." And I didn't think that was my interview. I just thought he wanted me to give him a call. So I gave him a call at 2 o'clock, and I call in, and it's him, the big league pitching coach, the pitching coordinator, the assistant coordinator, the farm director, director of player development. There's about 8 guys on this phone call. And I was not fully prepared to interview at that point. So luckily it went well and ended up getting the job.
That is so cool. It's just something that I'm sure a lot of college coaches out there, that's, it's a dream situation to be able to do something like that. Let's go back. I want to talk a little bit more about what you did with Driveline and just kind of weighted balls in general. What's the biggest mistake that guys make with weighted balls that causes injury or that gives people kind of a bad, or gives weighted balls a bad rep? What have you seen or heard or experienced that people are typically doing wrong when they're using weighted balls and it ends up causing injury?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing is not doing an assessment. I think making sure that the body is ready to handle the weighted balls, and you're in a good place throwing-wise. I think a lot of teams just like, hey, in the fall we're going to do weighted balls, but they haven't thrown yet. They're not in shape. They're coming off the summer where maybe they didn't play, and it's just too much too soon. I think there needs to be a progression from, hey, I'm going to start to play catch, I'm going to build up, I'm going to slowly add in some weighted balls. Then over a few months, a few weeks, you're in a place where you can go heavy and try and build velo. And then I think you, in season, need to tone it down because you're pitching. So I think, I think guys just overdo or program it poorly, and that's the biggest mistake.
If there's a high school player who's listening to this, and just say the player had been considering, or the player and dad had been considering weighted balls because they want to try to build some velocity. I know you can't put a full program together in a podcast like this, but what would you suggest to a kid like that who wants to try to add some velocity in the off season and is thinking about using weighted balls, has heard about Driveline? What is there anything you can suggest, or anything that you might say, like, this is probably how you want to go about it, just to help somebody who's in that situation?
Yeah, I would start by doing a ton of research, and then learning the drills just through light reps, just so you have the drills down. You can find all the information on weighted balls on the internet. You can find the drills on the internet, and then just start slow. They're not. A lot of kids see them as a magic pill, but if there's other issues going on, if there's strength issues, if there's mobility issues, it may not be the best thing for the kid to gain velo. It may actually be the worst thing for the kid. So I would probably get an assessment done, functional movement screening, something like that. That's pretty basic, but just to make sure the kid can handle it and see where they're at strength-wise. Maybe you just need to eat more and get in the weight room and not do weighted balls until you can handle it and handle that workload. So the first thing I'd probably do is get some kind of assessment, put a plan together. The basic Driveline, like 8-week program, is pretty good for someone that's starting, depending on what age you are and physicality and all of that. So that's a good starting point. And
you can find that on Driveline's website?
Yeah.
Okay. Where would you go to get an assessment done? I mean, if you don't have a guy that does that sort of specific thing for pitchers around you, where could a kid go? Can you go to, and this is a legitimate question I don't know the answer to, can you go to like a physical therapist in your area?
Yeah.
Or
I don't know the answer either. Usually I've been at a school or somewhere where that has somebody that can do it.
Okay.
So I'm sure a physio or someone could do it in that kid's area.
Okay. And what would you be checking for there? Like, what would you, when you walk into a place maybe doesn't do a lot of baseball type of screening, what should a kid who, again, is in this position that wants to start weighted balls or wants to figure out how to gain velocity, like, and you go to you don't have a pitching person that you are aware of in your area, and you're going to go to a physical therapist and, ask for an evaluation or a screening, like, what, is there anything specifically they should be asking for or looking for?
Like the FMS is pretty basic, but would be good for somebody young that's just starting out. And you're looking at if there's any issues, basically movement issues.
FMS stands for Functional Movement System?
Functional movement screen, yeah.
Screen.
So, like, is there any, like, ankle mobility? Is there any issues there, knee mobility or hips? Any issues at all, basically, full body, just to see if you're ready to start a program. It'd be similar to, like, starting to lift weights and your body can't handle it.
Okay. And obviously, if you're not physically ready for weighted balls, that's where you're going to see the injury, whether it's a strength issue or whether it's a mobility issue or any of the things you said, like, that's when you're going to cause injury. So it really is something you got to take pretty seriously.
Yeah, for sure. If you're just loading weight, it's like, I always refer to lifting weights, but if you're just loading weight on someone that can't handle it, it's a bad recipe. So similar way to balls, if you're not ready physically or where you're at throwing wise, just adding more weight and even underload is not a good recipe at all.
In your experience and from your research, is there a specific age or I guess a level of physical maturity that you need to reach before you should really start implementing either a weight program, a strength program, or weighted balls, and with whichever one you have, enough experience with to be able to talk about. But is there a specific age or a level of maturity that you need to get to before you start playing around with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I haven't spent a ton of time coaching younger kids, but I know there is a program on the Driveline website for younger kids, for youth. I think it's like 14, 15, 16, and I think it's just lighter weight, lighter reps, learning the drills, so that when you are a little more physical, you already know the drills, you know the programs, and you can just add weight.
One of the things you said earlier that I thought was pretty interesting was that you tried the Driveline program yourself and sort of experimented on yourself. Do you mind talking about that and just what that was like, how you did it, what your experience was, things that you went through, and just what that kind of sort of helped your learning curve? Yeah,
when I was at Dartmouth, I had a ton of time to research it, but I never actually got to do it at Dartmouth. So when I got to St. Louis, I saw that as my chance to implement it, but I hadn't actually done the drills myself, and I didn't feel confident teaching people the drills if I'd never done them or what it feels like or how to do them. So I literally got a set of weighted balls from St. Louis and went back in my garage and just did them. Saw how it felt, what was weird, what was funky, and figured it out. So my shoulder's pretty toast, but I actually felt great after the first time I did it. I just continued to do it a couple of times. I didn't do like the 8-week program or anything, but I just learned the drills and gave me more confidence to teach them, actually knowing what I was doing. So
I think it's such a good teaching point, coaching point in general, just to experience what you're teaching. I think it's the same whether you're a pitching coach or a strength coach or a hitting coach. Even if you're old and you feel like crap, and I think it's still a good plan to just try the stuff that you're teaching. If you're a hitting coach and you find a new drill, rather than just implementing it, just go through it. Just see what it feels like. That way you can sort of help to coach through the feel of things and what it's supposed to feel like and what the results are supposed to look like. I think it helps tremendously. It's something I used to do a lot. It's honestly something I used to like to do when I'd give lessons to a little kid, because if you give an hour hitting lesson, like, it's tough for that kid to sit there and swing for an hour. So, like, we would kind of go back and forth on a tee. He would take some swings, I'd take a couple, and it was just a lot of it was kind of just remembering what it feels like to do some things.
For sure. Especially with all the Twitter stuff now, with people posting drills, I think it's really smart to test that stuff out instead of just picking a drill off Twitter and doing it because you saw it on there.
That's a really good point, and not to,
there's a ton of good information on Twitter, but there's a lot of bad information too. So I just think picking out and doing it and experimenting and making sure you don't just do it with your players because somebody smart on Twitter posted it.
A lot of stuff on Twitter. I've said this before on podcasts, but there's a lot of information on there that sometimes particular tweets or drills will get a lot of attention, a lot of views, a lot of likes. And I just, there are things that I feel pretty confident that I have a good feel for that I just totally disagree with and feel like it's going to wreck a lot of hitters. And I'm sure you feel the same way with pitchers. Is there any way that, what do people do if they're looking at Twitter, they're a young player, coach of a young player, parent of a young player? How do you know whether or not what you're seeing is any good? Is there any way to do it other than just maybe trying it yourself like you just mentioned? Or how do you just differentiate what's good and what's not?
Yeah, I think trying it yourself is probably the ultimate way. Not everything works for everybody. So maybe, just because it works for that guy in the drill and the video, it's not necessarily going to work for you. Sometimes you see big leaguers doing stuff, and then a 12-year-old kid's going to take that drill from Twitter and try and do it. And they're probably not at that level yet, or may not be at that level yet. Or that drill may be the best thing for that kid. I don't know. So it's trial and error for me. And obviously who posts it is a big deal. If it's a pitching guy that I have a ton of respect for, has good information, is a good pitching coach, it makes it a little easier to kind of try out the drills. But I think anybody can post good information on there. So trial and error is probably the one and only way that you can find out if it's going to be helpful. And that same drill may be helpful for one guy and not another guy. So it's all about just knowing what you're trying to do with the drill and is it working. So
another good coaching point, and something that is not always easy for a young coach to realize, is the same. One drill is not going to be good for everybody. One plan that I kind of had as I got a little bit older as a coach was to give I believe in drills. I think, especially as a hitting coach, I think that drills are really important to build the foundation of the swing. And my plan as I got a little bit older in coaching was to implement a lot of drills, teach a lot of drills, and let kids sort of figure out which ones they like, which ones work for them, which ones help their swing, which ones make their swing feel healthy. When their swing sucks and doesn't feel good, which drills can they go back to kind of get it back. And I think those are important things that I think, again, as a young coach, it's hard to kind of come to that realization, like you might love a drill and want everybody to do it, but just may not be for everybody. And it's funny with Figured Out Baseball, I spend a lot of time around college coaches now, and some coaches that I really, really respect, they really could not buy into that more. Like, because I'll say things like, okay, is this something you do with everybody? How often are you doing it? Blah, blah, blah. And a lot of guys are like, yeah, I kind of let the pitchers sort of decide for themselves, or I kind of give them the freedom to be able to do this or that, because just no two arms are the same, no two bodies work the same, and it's hard. There aren't many things out there that work exactly the same for everybody. There might be some things that everyone needs to do for, band work, for example. If you believe in band work as a pitching coach, you might have everybody do band work, but one guy's work is going to be a little bit different than the next. Is that something that you've kind of also realized through your coaching career? I mean, you've been coaching for a while now, and you've tried a lot of these things yourself. You played at a high level. Is that how you feel as a coach, or how do you go about implementing things with your young teams? Because most of the teams that you're coaching, especially in the Angels, you have a lot of young guys that are kind of at the very beginnings of their career.
Yeah, I've always done it where here's the base program, and then you individualize based off what you do and don't like. If there's a drill where a guy's like, hey, I just don't like this drill, it doesn't feel good, it hurts, whatever, just don't do it. Or this is too many reps, or this ball's too heavy. I always allow the guys to individualize, because it's impossible for me to tell a guy how he feels, and I have no idea how his body feels. So you always need to get feedback from guys, and that's probably the biggest coaching part, is talking to the players while they're doing it, get their feedback, what works, what doesn't work, and just implement and really individualize the programs instead of just a blanket, everybody's going to do this, because I don't think that works. It may work for 3 or 4 of the guys on the staff, and then 3 or 4 guys may just get worse. So, I think communicating with the players and finding out what works and what doesn't work is huge.
So there's so much information out there now. There are a lot of places you can find good info. If you are on particularly Twitter, probably more so than Instagram or Facebook, I would think. You may disagree with that, but I think you can find a lot of good stuff on Twitter primarily. I think a lot of guys want to post on there. And going back to kind of how you got your start, by posting some information, and the right people saw it, and you got an opportunity. And now I think that there are so many coaches jumping from college ball to pro ball that a lot of guys are trying this. A lot of college coaches out there are trying almost to a point desperately to do anything they can to get noticed. They have blogs. They'll post videos constantly of things they're doing with their players. And I think, there's what I would almost call a phenomenon of a couple of years ago, especially. It was like guys would post a lot of drills they were doing, and they continued to do that to the point where it was like they built themselves up to be, I don't know how to say it, sort of almost, I guess, a guru online. Like this guy's like the outfield, this guy's the infield guru, whatever it is. You build yourself up to be like a real expert in a certain area because of what you do on social media.
Yeah.
On the other side of things, there's a question in this, I promise. On the other side of things, there are guys who I think have a good base, but just kind of refuse to sort of sell themselves that way. And they think, well, I'm going to let my resume speak for itself, and I'm not going to be one of these guys to just, post everything I ever do on social media for people to see, and they believe that the wins and losses and what they produce in the field will be enough to get them a job. Do you have any particular thoughts or feelings about that, or if you were speaking to a young coach who's just getting started, just finished playing a year or two ago, or maybe within the last 5 years, and is kind of at a point where you were, where it's time to build, it's time to go to the next step? How do you do it? And is posting on social media, like posting everything you do on social media, a good way to go about it, or is it getting so saturated now that it doesn't quite have the pool that it used to?
Yeah, I think what changed was guys originally were putting out information to just share information with other coaches to make everybody better. But then those guys that were putting out good information started getting hired, and now they can't put out information because most organizations don't let them. And people realized that guys were getting hired from Twitter, so they started putting information out to get hired, which is a lot different than just putting it out to share with other coaches. Because I don't think those original coaches that started sharing stuff thought that they were going to get hired by minor league organizations. So that's not why they did it. And I think it's just people are just posting to post, and they're not necessarily always posting good information. They'll just post some drill that they randomly made up, and we don't know if it works or doesn't work, or and I think it's just getting saturated with videos. The hard part is that's where the guys are getting hired from. So if you are a young coach, I would say it's okay to put out information. Don't saturate your Twitter with a video every day or 5 videos a day. Just make sure you're putting out good information. If you're going to write an article, make it a good article. Put a lot of thought into it. People are just starting to post stuff instead of actually posting good info that other coaches would like to read.
I'm glad you said that and didn't make me say it. No, I think you're dead on with all that.
Yeah, it's hard because I don't blame those young coaches for putting out information, because that's where the guys are getting hired from. I would just make sure that you're putting out good stuff.
It was to a point a couple years ago that there was a guy he was actually an assistant coach at a school where I knew the head coach pretty well. I'd known him for a long time, was friends with him, and I kind of talked to this guy, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to lose one of my coaches. I was like, why? Did somebody tell you they're leaving? He's like, no, but this guy's going to get hired by a minor league team. Somebody's going to hire him. And I'm like, seriously? Just, from the Twitter stuff he's posting out there? He's like, yeah, I'm telling you, man, he's getting tons of attention from it. And the guy was good. Like, he posted a lot of good stuff. Yeah. And he did eventually, he got hired. I can't remember which organization hired him, but and I won't say his name, but he's now a minor league coach. And there are a lot of guys that are out there like that I think you're really good. They were posting a lot of good stuff. There are other guys that I almost think fool people by what they post, and they also, I've seen guys that have posted some things that I think are so ridiculous and so far off of what works, and then 6 months later, they're posting things that are completely the opposite. but they post so many times that like you can't go back and find something old, and then it's like they fool an organization. And I know one guy in particular that it's on my mind that did get hired, and I guess what I kind of come back to your point of putting good stuff out there that people actually want to see and want to read is that eventually you're going to get exposed if you don't have a real base of knowledge and something that you firmly believe in and something you have actually seen work in a game. I just think there's a big difference to coaching guys in a cage as opposed to coaching guys on the field. And eventually, people, you're going to be found out, and and what you're doing is not going to work.
There's a whole lot more to coaching than posting videos. Like, even if you do get hired, you need to be able to talk to players. You need to be able to interact with players, get players to trust you. It's a lot more than just knowing the drills and the information. So I think it's hard to, and obviously these guys are getting hired off Twitter, go through a series of interviews too. So they're able to do something that made the organizations hire them during the interview process too. But yeah, there's a lot more to it than just posting on Twitter.
No, the Angels obviously sought you out, and obviously you're not in the front office or anything, but do they seem to continue to do that? As you're going through the organization, this will be your third year with them. Do they seem to, for lack of a better way to say it, do they seem to kind of scour social media and find guys that are out there that have great info that they almost like they're finding their own applicants as opposed to waiting for the applications to come in?
Yeah, I would say they scour everywhere. The internet, Twitter, the ABCA, any baseball event, Pitchapalooza. If a guy makes sense and they want to interview him, they'll reach out. So we've gone kind of to the way of coaching college coaches, younger guys. That's kind of what we've done the last couple of years, and I think it's been great.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's such a shift of coaches that are being hired out of college now? Because when I coached you, I think the year that I was at Southeastern, I was, 23, 24, and I didn't play pro ball. And at that time, it was like you had to play pro ball if you wanted a chance to coach in pro ball. And it was almost like nobody went from college ball straight to pro ball without past pro experience, right? Yeah. But now it's the opposite. Now a lot of guys are jumping from college to pro ball. Why do you think that shift is happening so quickly now?
I think a couple of teams did it. I don't know exactly who, but a couple of teams did it early and had a ton of success with it. And I think, obviously, like the college environment is more of a teaching environment. You do more drills, you do more stuff like that than traditionally they did in pro ball. Pro ball, it was like you're a really good player already, and we do PFPs, and you're already pretty good. So there wasn't a ton of, and this is what I've heard. Obviously, I wasn't there, but there wasn't a ton of true coaching. Obviously, there was coaches there, and then they were doing what they could. But I think the college coaches started to think outside the box a little more with drills and player development, and the minor league team saw a chance to snap those guys up. That could really teach baseball, whether they played in the big leagues or played pro ball or not. If you can teach it, you can teach it. So I think there's kind of that area there where pro teams can go get these younger guys that are looking to advance in their coaching careers and give them a chance to coach and make the players better.
Okay, go ahead.
One thing I left, I also think that being able to talk and relate to players is huge too. So if you can get the younger college guys that want to learn and want to get better and want to develop as coaches, but they can also talk to the players and relate to them, I think that's been a big reason why they've kind of gone to the college route.
Is there any issue from what you've seen, or even in your own experience, you played pro ball for a couple of years. Is there any issue with guys, pro players, I guess, buying into what they're hearing from guys who never were at that level? In other sports, that's not an issue. Like you see guys coaching in the NBA or the NFL that, were very mediocre college players, and then they're really good coaches at the pro level. But baseball is just a little bit of a different sport there. have you, in your own experience, but whether yourself or other guys that you've been on the coaching staffs with, has anybody had any issue with players really wanting to buy in and listen to them, just knowing that, maybe that 20-year-old is saying, well, I'm a better player than you ever were, like, why should I listen to you? Is that an issue at all, or have you not really seen that happen?
I think that is an issue at times, and I think you kind of need to earn the player's trust. I know as players, they do their background work. They Google the coaches. They're like, this guy ever play in the big leagues? They ask. I've had players straight up ask me, like, where'd you play? Why'd you do that? Like, where are you from? How'd you get here from Australia? But I think ultimately, if they realize that you can help them, then they buy in. So as a young coach, it's your job to earn their trust, be able to talk to them, be able to relate to them, and then for them to realize that, hey, this guy can actually help me. Whether that's through doing something in a bullpen and it works and they see themselves getting better, or whatever it is, you have to find a way to gain the player's trust. And I've seen it just in my first couple of years. The first year, the player's a little standoffish. You go into your season and you have 15 to 20 guys that you're around every day, and then those guys start to buy in, and then the next year you get more guys, and over time, I think ultimately the players talk to each other about, hey, I like this coach, this, like, they get it. So if there's a coach that they don't like or they disagree with, it's hard if you can't gain the player's trust.
I'll tell you, I don't like to talk about myself a lot. Usually when I do, I like to talk about what I did wrong so people don't repeat my mistakes. But like when I arrived at Southeastern, it was my second year of coaching, and I was a volunteer. Well, I spent a half a season at Duquesne, the little Division I in Pittsburgh, where I went to school. I spent a half a season there as a second assistant, but I wasn't like the hitting coach. When I arrived at Southeastern, I got there for the spring semester. I'm the hitting coach, and you get there in January. You're going to play games in February, and there's a lot of pressure to do some things. And it was like I felt like I had to come in and immediately impact kids. Like if I wait to try to do anything with this guy, to try to fix him or help him, if I wait until he starts to fail, it's gonna be too late. It's gonna be halfway through the season, and I'm gonna get fired. And I felt like I had to immediately start working with guys and coaching guys, and that was a mistake. But it was a difficult thing to do mid-year. But I'll just say that to lead into this question. What's your plan as you get your pitchers now? You'll have your pitchers in Burlington, and I'm sure some of them you probably coached last year as you're moving up a level. But what will be your plan when you first get with guys as far as when exactly you're going to start to try to tweak some things with them? What's your plan year to year with that?
Yeah, it all depends. I'm going to have a good group this year because I was in the AZL and then I was in Orem the last 2 years. So most of those guys will probably be moving up to Burlington. So a high percentage of the guys that I have, I've probably been around for a while, which makes it a little easier. And those guys will probably get started right away. It depends on what the organization wants to do for each individual guy. Like every single guy will have an individual player plan and what we're trying to do for that guy. And we don't really want to wait a ton of time with those guys. So it'll be right away, kind of giving them, hey, here's your plan, here's what we think you need to improve, and here's how we're going to do it. And then just kind of get their feedback on what they think is going to help them do that. If they agree with kind of the plan we have, so we can work with them and try and get their buy-in. I think that's the main thing, is getting their buy-in as quick as possible, because if they're on board, we can get a lot better really quickly. So it'll be a lot easier for me with a bunch of guys I've already have. But yeah, just getting to know your guys early, joking around with them, talk to them, learn about them, where they're from, their families, all that kind of stuff. Try and assess what type of learner they are, what kind of person they are. Do they get frustrated easy? And then just kind of put a plan in place for each individual guy.
That honestly, Tyler, was something I wish someone had taken me aside early on and said, you need to establish personal trust.
Yeah.
before this player's going to listen to you? Because, I mean, you'll have some players that are going to listen to you no matter what, because that's just how they're wired.
Yeah.
And you're going to have some players that may never listen to you. But even that player, I think you probably can reach at some point if you establish the trust with them. But that was something, honestly, it took me a while to figure that out. And you almost have to have a couple players that you fail with, unless someone does take you aside and actually say that to you, which no one ever did to me. But it's like you have to have a couple experiences where you totally fail a kid and you sit back and self-evaluate, like, where did I go wrong here? And then you just kind of realize that I never got that player's trust. And maybe he tried something and didn't work out, and he realized that, and then he thinks that you're just out to, all you care about is him as a baseball player. I've had that happen, and wish someone had given me the advice that you just gave. I think it's such an important part of just getting a player to listen to you.
Yeah, and that's probably been the one thing. There's always guys that are frustrating that you think you can't get through to, but there's a way. That's the hard part, is getting through to that one or two guys that don't agree or don't see it the same way you do or the same way the organization does, or they kind of want to do it their own way. That's probably the number one coaching, is how do I get through to that guy? And there's always a way.
I want to switch gears for the end of the podcast here, just for the last, I don't know what we have left, 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes, and just talk a little bit about something I actually didn't know about you before we started recording the podcast. But there's a break in your bio. You played in Perth between the end of 2011, early 2012, and you did not start coaching until the spring of 2015. That was your first spring of coaching in college. And you kind of shared with me what happened in the meantime. Is that something that you're okay talking about in the podcast? Do you mind just telling people kind of what happened in those couple of years, that gap?
Yeah, for sure. So 2012, I finished up playing in the ABL in Australia, and then came back to the States to get married to my college girlfriend. When I came back, I had a degree, but I had no work experience. All I'd ever done is played baseball or been to college. And my father-in-law actually worked for an IT company and was willing to give me a full-time job as a project manager. I didn't work for him directly. I actually worked for one of the other owners. It was really cool old lady. She was the best. So I worked there for 6 years as a project manager, which was really, really important for me in my career, but I hated every minute of it. I hated being stuck in an office. I didn't like IT. I didn't understand it. I was learning on the job. But it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I continued to have that job when I was a volunteer at Dartmouth and St. Louis. So for 3 years, I did both jobs, which was hard, and had a newborn. So it was a frustrating couple of years. But yeah, it taught me a lot. Being a project manager and being in the real world, dealing with real world people was huge. Obviously, as a project manager, you have to deal with timelines and organizing and scheduling and unhappy people, happy people. So that was my first experience of people being mad that something happened, people being happy that it got done earlier, scheduling, dealing with 4 or 5 different parties on one individual project. So it was huge for me. It's probably the best thing that ever happened, even though I didn't like being stuck in an office, and I knew I wanted to coach the minute I could. I actually, halfway through, I think it was 3 years in, I went to Brenda, my boss, and was like, I've been applying. She knew that I wanted to coach baseball eventually, and it wasn't a long-term thing for me. But I told her I got the job in New Hampshire, and I wanted to keep my job and work remotely. And I didn't know if she was going to go for it or not. And if she didn't go for it, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So she was all about it. She said, go chase your dreams, keep working. As long as you work, you're fine. So I had to work remotely. The company's in Missouri, and I was in New Hampshire. So yeah, I was working all day in the baseball office, working on IT stuff. Which is kind of crazy.
That probably speaks a lot to your work ethic, the fact that your boss would let you go there. And to me, it's a good lesson just to do the best you can where you are, even if you don't love what you're doing. do the best you can, and a lot of times someone's going to notice, and it's going to help you out in some way or another, even if you don't love the industry you're in. Maybe you're not coaching, or maybe you're like Tyler, maybe you're coaching and you're doing something else, and you can't take to something else. You can't half-ass it. You've got to give it everything you've got for your life to become really what it's, what you want it to become.
Yeah, and I spent 3 years doing both, and then I finally got my first full-time job at Lindenwood, and then I was there for a couple months and got hired by the Angels. So everything moved pretty fast after I was able to get my first full-time job.
How'd the conversation go with your wife when you told her that you wanted a job and you're living in Missouri, by family, and all of a sudden you're going to move to New Hampshire? What was that question like? Because you had one child at the time, and you're married?
No, we didn't have any kids at the time.
Yet.
We actually had our first kid in New Hampshire.
Okay.
So, none at the time, but she knew I wanted to coach, and she knew I emailed probably every Division I coach in the country. And the only response I got was from Dartmouth, Coach Whalen there, which was awesome. And he actually only responded because he somehow knew my junior college coach in Arizona, which is the complete opposite side of the country. And he saw that on my resume and said, I know Dave Grant, so I just wanted to call you back. So that's kind of how it started. It didn't pay any money, a little bit of camp money, but not enough to even do anything with. So, yeah, I'd never been to New Hampshire. I'd never been to the East Coast. Neither had my wife. And we just decided to move. So she's not one to do things like that either, so it was huge for her. Since then, we've moved about 8 times in 6 years. So, yeah, we're professional movers at this point.
That stuff's a lot of fun. That's one of the reasons why, toward the end of my coaching career, why just I don't know, one way or another, we need some stability, because that's how it was actually. You have a similar story to me. That when I came out to Iowa, I had never been to Iowa. I didn't even visit Southeastern. I just had, honestly, I kind of needed to move on from where I was in the middle of the year, and I looked to see what jobs were open in November, and there were like 5 jobs in the country that I probably had a shot at, and I applied for all of them, and Coach Schulte at Southeastern was one of the couple calls I got back, and I accepted the job without ever having been there, just because Schulte won, and I really wanted to go somewhere and win, and I wanted to learn how to win, and ended up going out there and met my wife when I was in Iowa, actually, and then we moved. We lived in 5 states in 8 years, and my daughter lived in 3 states. My oldest daughter lived in 3 states before she turned a year old. Actually, I'm sorry. She lived in 3 states by the time she was like a year and 2 months, which is pretty impressive. So, we needed a little bit of stability. Let me ask you one more question before I let you go. Other guys I've talked to there seems to be a common theme with guys who kind of struggle, go through what some guys would say, go through the suck of, having these jobs, not making any money. And it seems like a lot of guys had a point in their career where it was like, if this doesn't work, I might be done. I might have to quit and just get a normal job, kind of a breaking point for their careers. Did you have that? I mean, you were still fairly young. You still are fairly young when you got the Angels job, but did you have that at any point in your career where you just thought like, all right, if something doesn't change within, the next semester or next couple months or whatever, then I'm probably going to be out of this?
I definitely thought about it. I don't know if it was ever a real thought, like I was actually going to do it. One was I had a real job and I was making decent money, but I hated it. So I kind of already knew that that wasn't what I wanted to do. And it wasn't about money. That's the number one thing I've learned, is that you can make all the money in the world, but if you're miserable, it's not worth it. So it's something you do every day. And if you're passionate about it, like baseball, it's not really a job. So it's not about the money. I'm sure making hundreds of thousands would help. Make it a little less crappy, but no, it's not about the money for sure. And there are times when you want to quit, but if it's something you truly want to do, which it always has been for me, probably even when I was playing, I probably thought I was going to coach at some point. So yeah, I don't know if I ever seriously entertained not doing anything baseball related.
Well, hopefully you don't have to. Hopefully things just keep working for you. I guess this will be the last question. And this is the last time I'm going to say last question. But what's the future for Tyler Anderson? Do you have goals of trying to move up within your organization? Like, is the ultimate goal to coach in the big leagues? Do you think you might like to be a manager or remain a pitching coach, or just kind of whatever, any opportunity comes along? Have you thought much about just where, long term, where you'd like to end up?
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever want to manage or be a head coach. I enjoy being a pitching coach, and I think, especially at the college level, those head coaches positions have turned into fundraising, speaking, that you don't ever get to do.
Putting out fires.
Stuff. Yeah, you're never actually coaching. You're always doing something else. So I think being a pitching coach is what I want to do. If I were to move up with the Angels, which I'd love to, eventually I would love to be a pitching coordinator over a big league pitching coach. I don't see myself ever being a big league pitching coach. I think I would enjoy the coordinator position more, like scheduling, putting programs together, coaching the coaches, and running all that stuff over coaching in the big leagues. I just don't see myself doing that. Obviously I would if it presented itself at some point, and I was in the right place. But if I was to get out of pro ball, I'd love to be a pitching coach in a Power 5 conference. But those two options are probably it for me. Just continue to work my way up and hopefully at some point be a coordinator or be a pitching coach in a Power 5 school.
Very cool. You never know how things will change, but that's always how I felt as well. Even as a college coach, I didn't have any real interest in being a head coach. I wanted to recruit. This is horrible to say as not something you probably want to hear a coach say, but I could say it now because I'm not coaching anywhere. But, being on the field, like being in the cage with hitters for like hours on end was like, that didn't give me any enjoyment whatsoever. Especially places I wasn't the hitting coach, especially you're in the cage like throwing BP for like 3 hours. That was not something I personally enjoyed very much, but I love the recruiting side of it. I'm 35 now, and I've been a high school head coach, which I liked more than I thought that I would. But all the outside crap that you have to deal with is there even at the high school level, and it's something that I think head coaches at every level have to deal with. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. I liked kind of running the program. I liked kind of being the one that made the decisions. And where I sit in my chair right now, it'd be very difficult for me to go be an assistant anywhere, only because I have my, I've got my thoughts and ideas of what works in most areas. Pitching is probably the area that I feel the least strongly about it, that I have an opinion that really, that I wouldn't stray from. But it'd be very hard for me to go somewhere and not be the hitting coach and see a hitting philosophy implemented that I didn't believe in or whatever. So, but I definitely see what you're saying, and I think that, as you continue to have success in the Angels, I'm sure things will continue to open up for you. Tyler, it's been a really great hour here spending with you on the phone. This is Tyler Anderson, everybody. He's a minor league pitching coach with the Angels. He and I spent one semester together at Southeastern Community College way back then, so it's always cool to catch up with people that you once knew in a past life. And Tyler, just the time has been great. I really appreciate you spending some time here. You'll be starting, I'm sure you'll be reporting very soon to camp. But appreciate you spending some time with us today on the podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.